Hey Five Lakes, I'm Kennedy, and thanks for joining us for today's devotional. Today we'll be in Psalm 105 verses 4 and 5, which says this: Search for the Lord and for his strength, continually seek him. Remember the wonders he has performed, his miracles, and the rulings he has given. The human brain is a fascinating thing to me. We don't even know a fraction of what it can do. But one of the things that makes me laugh is that we often forget things. I forget things all the time. When I went off to college, I actually had to switch up my habits and get into the habit of literally writing everything down because of how much I would forget. There was just so much information. Or even more recently, for my first anniversary with my husband, I totally forgot to get him a card. And cards are like really big in his family, so I forgot to do that. So I decided to bike all the way to the gas station that's next to our house and purchase whatever anniversary card they had, because at least it was something. And the funny thing is it ended up being a 25-year anniversary card. So now I'm just trying to remember, 20 years from now, okay, on our 25th anniversary, I'll just get him a 1-year card for that. My point is whether it's intentional or accidental on our part, God knows that we will inevitably forget stuff. We can't forget the things we want to, and we forget the things we don't want to. And I'm left with questions like, is forgetfulness a characteristic that God designed us with? Or is it a consequence of having an imperfect mind? And frankly, those are questions that I don't have the answers for. But regardless, we know that if all things work together for God's glory and our good, then that must mean that remembering the past can be a good thing. It can be a tool we utilize rather than just a skeleton in the closet. So if we go back to Psalm 105 verse 4, remember the wonders he has performed, his miracles, and the rulings he has given. This particular psalm is classified as a praise psalm, and fun fact, it's basically a word-for-word quotation of 1 Chronicles 16, which is a history and retelling of God's people and his faithfulness towards them. As a whole, we read in the Bible that God's people went through some pretty traumatic things: enslavement, exile, persecution, divine judgment, just to name a few. The Bible acknowledges these traumatic things, not just for the individual, but also for the community as a whole. And still, God reframes these things. He instructs them, and therefore us, to remember those things in light of how they weren't left enslaved. They weren't left exiled. They weren't left persecuted. God remembered them, and he was faithful toward them, just as he will be for us. Part of seeking God is remembering him, who he is and what he's done. In other words, what the psalmist would say is part of our task is remembering his wonders, his miracles, and the rulings he has given. In other words, God's people's, they're tasked with remembering his faithfulness, yes, but also sharing about it. And that's our testimony. That's where that comes in. So I want to give you guys a little bit of a challenge for this particular devotion. The simple challenge is remember God in everything. A way you can do this is by keeping track of your prayers. You can write them down, you can type them out, but the point is that you have a point of reference, something that you can go back to show yourself when you forget that God still is faithful, even when you may not feel it or you may not see it. But the more challenging and complex challenge I have is something called a life map. If you want to be brave and work on this, it's very challenging, but it's called a life map. The exercise is basically this. You write out the highs and lows of your life, the spiritual highs and lows, and you dwell on them and ask the Lord to show you basically, okay, how have you shaped my life through these things? Like what are the patterns? What are the things that I see? How do I see God in these things? It can be a very healing process. It can also be very difficult, but primarily healing if you allow it to be. There are a lot of other ways you can choose to remember God's faithfulness. Get familiar with your own testimony, like I said, through this life map. Learn how to share your life story with someone else. Or on the flip side, intentionally ask someone else to share their life's story. Be more open in life groups. It's better to risk being vulnerable with fellow believers than to isolate yourself. Oftentimes, it's someone else's strong faith that helps pull us out of whatever hole we're trapped in. So choose to remember. As Christians, we don't remember God's faithfulness just for ourselves. We remember for those who have forgotten, just like other believers before us remembered when we forgot. So let's work together on becoming people who listen well in order to encourage well. The same power of the gospel that redirects our future is the same power that reframes the past. Sometimes we just have to put in a little extra effort in order to see it. So if you end up doing this exercise, don't be afraid to share about your experience. I look forward to hearing about it, and I also look forward to being with you next time. Have a great week.